Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Innovation Insights. I'm your host, Donny Shimamoto, and I am the Inspiration Architect for the Center for Accounting Transformation. During these episodes, we'll visit with a variety of people who can share with us ideas, information, technology, and business practices that are accelerating innovation and transforming the accounting profession. Today, I am joined by Colleen Knuff and Stefan Davis. Colleen is a CPA who serves as the Vice President of Product Management for Audit at Wolters Kluwer, North America. And joining her is her colleague, Stefan Davis, a former auditor and one of the co-founders of Teaming Analytics, and now the lead product manager for Wolters Kluwer's audit solutions. Let's dive right in. We know that there's a number of challenges in the public accounting industry, not the least of which is staffing shortage and continued remote work. This is forcing auditors to be more efficient in their work while still continuing to audit deep enough to protect the public that relies on all this information that's published in the financial reports. So Colleen, how is Wolters Kluwer innovating to help auditors overcome these challenges?
Well, thanks for having us, Donny. Wolters Kluwer is innovating in a number of ways, from really investing in ideas like data-driven audit, which will help automate some of those really time-consuming and highly manual tasks that are performed in almost, if not every, engagement. So our cloud-based CCH Access audit suite actually makes working remotely a little bit easier and more effective. So, I've got a couple of examples. So our Knowledgecoach product, as an example, enables some real-time collaboration in the audit programs. One of the challenges we know that remote teams have experienced with, their desktop-based tools, even if they got them into more of a virtual environment, was there's still a lot of handing off, right? It's back and forth, or we have to wait for people to sync their work. So making sure that this is more of a real-time collaboration environment enables remote work now, and obviously in the future, as we believe remote work will continue to be a part of this hybrid world we're all going to live in. Another product, CCH Access Financial Prep, which is largely used to pull in trial balance information, and you could use it for preparing compile type in engagements. Well, that ensures that all of the staff that are doing some of the tasks like adding journal entries, well, all of those adjustments are also updated in real time. So again, not having to work in silos, but enabling the team to really work together and see what's going on as the work's progressing. And our engagement product, which takes advantage of all of that trial balance information that was in financial prep, but it also adds that work paper element to it. Well, this really allows auditors to see the bigger picture of all the work that their peers are performing and understanding the progress of that work, again, without having to wait for those team members to sync. In a lot of the products that we're used to using and we're certainly using before the pandemic started, a lot of the work we performed was like, I do my work and I check it in, and you did your work, Donny, and you checked it in, and the partners or the managers could eventually see it all together. But what we're really seeing is this move towards this real-time collaboration effort, and we're certainly doing that throughout our product suite. Another one of the ways that
I was just curious, since you mentioned engagement. So how is the CCH Access audit different from engagement, different from financial prep, just for the people that are kind of maybe new to the CCH suite?
Sure. So our ProSystem FX suite, which includes Knowledgecoach for risk assessment and audit program tailoring and the engagement product, those were our desktop-based applications, our on-premise tool sets. We're replicating a lot of that in the cloud. So Knowledgecoach, there's a version of it in the Access suite. That's where all this real-time collaboration is really occurring. Financial prep is the trial balance piece of it, and it's available for the smaller types of engagements like prepare and compile review, or maybe you're pulling information in to prepare it for a tax return and sending it off to tax software. So that's what it does, and it's also in that Access Cloud product. And then the last one I just mentioned is engagement. So again, it's the cloud version of the on-premise application, but we're not just bringing all of that functionality across to the cloud. We're also trying to make sure that it's more consistent in its navigation. It's really intuitive. All the information that you would want to see on the screen is actually on the screen, and there's some ability to customize your view of it as well. So just different ways than our on-premise customers are seeing the data today.
Great, thank you.
And then the other way that we're innovating is we just released a new solution, CCH Access Validate, towards the end of last year. And this really empowers teams to work faster and more effectively because it does a few things for them. So Validate actually transforms the way firms perform bank confirmations. So we're kind of taking that process that's been really manual and maybe not individually sort of time consuming, but it really draws out the process, right? So we're bringing this down to sort of 5 clicks in 5 minutes. So a really big time saving there. And we're accomplishing all of this efficiency actually by leveraging blockchain to protect the data and streamline that workflow. And this creates a huge opportunity actually for firms to shift that confirmation work from maybe some of the senior staff down to junior staff, maybe even interns or admin staff, because we've really simplified the solution set.
That's actually wonderful news. I love too that you're mentioning this whole, push the work down. I actually did research for CPA.com, and gosh, I'm gonna say I think it was like 6, maybe even 10 years ago when we looked specifically at confirmations and how confirmations were done. And the research back then showed us push that work down, get it out of the hands, even get it, like you said, into the interns or admins' hands and get out of the professional staff. And that's one of the biggest challenges I think that firms are facing right now is just, I don't have enough staff and everyone is so busy. So if I can get this to people that were typically non-billable or have a much lower bill rate, it'll help my budget as well as help get some workload passed down. And that reminds me, you guys actually got an award for Validate, didn't you? Was it Accounting Today that recognizes one of the top new products for this year? Congratulations, that's amazing.
Well, thanks, Donny. And we're certainly honored to be a recipient of the award. It not only recognizes the innovative nature of that solution, but it also demonstrates that simple solutions to complex problems really resonates with firms.
I think that's so true. I think that a lot of times we try too hard to make things just overly complicated. And often when we're going through this whole innovation, change management and transformation, which is really what we do at the center here, is really helping people get through transformation. People want to take something that they've done manually and automate that in that way. And often I'm telling them, wait, stop. Think about if you had started from scratch, how would you do this? And often that becomes much more simpler than the way they're doing it now. So that's actually great advice that you guys baked into the way that you did the product.
Yeah, thank you.
I was curious too. I remember when I was reading the article about the award that it mentioned something about X9. Now, I wasn't even familiar with that. Can you tell us a little bit about this X9 thing?
Sure. So X9 is an industry standard setting body for financial institutions. They're the group that behind the scenes works with banks and other types of financial instruments and institutions to create standards like, all of the standards were created around bank, check standardization is a good example, right? Like that's kind of how long they've been around. So they kind of in the background and help streamline and create these efficiencies as well as these standards across banks. So we recently were accepted as a member to this group, and they have a subgroup at the moment that's taking a look at bank confirmations. And banks, just like accounting firms, just like the clients they audit, everybody's looking for a way to make sure that we're automating this in a much more conducive manner to everybody. So we're sitting on that subcommittee that's helping to create the rules around how do we automate bank confirmations and create that same set of standards and consistency. That's been a great opportunity for us to actually get in touch with a lot of these banks, understand the process from their perspective. We certainly understood it from an accounting firm's perspective, but also understanding what the banks expect from us was a huge part of us being able to create this really simple solution to what has been a really manual and sometimes a terribly iterative process, right? Lots of firms have experienced you submit something, a bank confirmation request, and it comes back to you because it doesn't have quite the right information or it's not in the format that the banks are expecting it. So being on the inside of understanding how these standards are being formed has been really helpful.
Oh, excellent. I'm so glad to hear that the banks are including you guys in. A lot of times I'll see them include a practitioner, which is great, but they really only get one perspective. With having a company like yours in there, you've got all these multiple perspectives that you're bringing in, as well as the tech solution. That's awesome. Let's go back to one of the other concepts that you brought up, this concept of a data-driven audit. We've been talking about that, I feel like, for years now, and it sounds like you guys are finally making some of that a reality. So what does that mean, this data-driven audit?
Yeah, those terms, the data-driven audit, some people say the digital audit, are starting to become more widely used. You know, we're hearing them much more frequently, but I think different people have different interpretations of what that means. Like you said, you know, what does that mean? Different people have a different view of this. For us, for me, that means taking in data right at the start of the audit and then leveraging that data throughout the whole audit. So as we collect more data during the audit, as we generate data ourselves in the way we actually perform the audit, using that data to improve the way that we audit. And what does that matter to firms? Firms that we speak to tell us that they want to be more efficient. You know, at the end of the day, they want more profitability. They want to be able to be more competitive in the market, but also obviously making sure that they're still performing a compliant audit, making sure they're passing peer review, and making sure they're delivering a quality audit, which addresses risk from their perspective and delivers a quality service to their clients. You know, not just a quick and easy audit, but also providing extra value in the services that we provide. And that kind of efficiency, effectiveness kind of dichotomy is kind of driven by not over auditing, you know, not doing more work than we need to, not under auditing, not making sure that we are covering all the risks that the client's subjected to, and making sure that we pick the most appropriate procedures to identify to address a risk that we've identified, because there's so many different ways to perform a procedure. There's lots of different ways to skin a cat. Making sure that we choose a procedure which is an efficient way of doing it, but also gives us great coverage. And then when we actually perform them, doing that in a way that's as efficient as possible. And some interpretations of kind of data-driven audit are kind of, it's a revolution in auditing, but the standards aren't changing. Auditors, you know, we know auditors are pretty risk averse, you know, by nature, they're risk averse people. So really, to get traction, a data-driven audit needs to represent kind of an evolution in the way that we audit that's still familiar and isn't throwing away everything that we've done and we've used to, but really enhances the way that we actually do our audits. So, you know, the data-driven audit or data-driven auditing is already part of our approach. Tools like Teammate Analytics, which is our data analytics solution, really designed for every auditor to do, has been really successful because it's kind of a bit of a game changer for firms. Instead of having this kind of central function doing your analytics and sending you a report at the end of it, we're enabling regular auditors to do the analytics work as part of the actual audit. It's really integrated into the audit work they're doing. So you're not just taking a report and putting it on file, you're making sure that what you learn from the analytics is integrated into the way we do things. Taking like journal entry testing as an example, by doing a decent job of it, and by that I mean not just scanning down for things that look unusual to the naked eye, and by moving it from something that's kind of an afterthought, we do it at the end of the audit because we've got to, it's a checkbox exercise, to something that's early in the audit, can really inform our risk assessment, and that really helps us in the tailoring of the way we do an audit, preventing us from under auditing, preventing us from over auditing, giving us that efficiency and that effectiveness. Colleen, in terms of Knowledgecoach, is another tool that really helps us already drive to more of a data-driven audit. You talk a little bit about that?
Sure, thanks, Steph. The basic premise of Knowledgecoach is really to have the risk assessment linked to an audit program, right? And in that way that creates that understanding of how what we've assessed from a risk perspective is actually getting tested in our audit programs. And the way we tailor those audit programs is, you know, based on how you answer the first sets of questions actually determines or proposes the next set of steps while still allowing the auditor to continue to tailor that approach. So we're not dictating what you're going to do, but rather guiding. And the diagnostics that are available in Knowledgecoach are there, and they provide guidance on where are there gaps or inconsistencies between how the auditor has assessed that risk and responded perhaps to an audit program step. So, you know, identifying maybe where, you know, when you're down in the weeds, sometimes you can get off on a tangent and you didn't mean to. Well, the diagnostics are there to help ensure that we're keeping everything on track. So this really ensures that an auditor stays on track and then knows where attention is required immediately rather than after a partner review, which then creates a much more efficient, compliant, and dynamic audit.
I like that. So that's tying back into the earlier concept you mentioned about everything is synchronizing in real time. And so I'm now waiting for this after the fact. Yeah, I remember when, and it's been about it's been over 20 years since I've actually done an audit. But I remember going through that process, and afterwards you're looking at what the staff did and you're like, why did you do this? Oh, you just wasted all this time and I couldn't catch it early enough. So I can definitely see the issues there. It was interesting listening to some of Stefan's comments as well, because and even Colleen, you're mentioning risk, and this is giving me flashbacks. I was involved in creating some of the guidance when the risk-based auditing standards came out, or I say re-emerged, although that's technically the way we've always done audits. And that was what was that, like in the 2008, 2009, I want to say, like back then. And I feel like all of that is coming back up again. I think the biggest difference, as Stefan was mentioning, is that we now have tools that actually help us do this, versus before they were saying, well, you should do this, and everyone still kind of had to figure out their own way. But now we've got tools and data that actually helps quantify what's going on. And that's across, I think, the profession. We're seeing this, you need to use data to now quantify and inform your risk assessment and your judgment. And this often requires more than just financial data. And I think you guys had something along that lines too, where it's this is, what type of data do we actually use to leverage to get these types of insights into risks and maybe additional procedures we might do.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at kind of how most firms audit now, the TB is kind of the ultimate set of data. That's what's driving our financial statements and our lead sheets, and effectively that guides a lot of our audit work. A lot of firms are obviously using the general ledger specifically for journal entry testing to try and find those kind of risky transactions, maybe evidence of management manipulation. But kind of taking those further, those two pieces of data can be extremely valuable if you combine them together, the general ledger and the trial balance, and with multiple years of that data. So going back 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that can give you some really valuable data to use for your risk assessment. You can understand what's going on this year, month by month, not just looking at the snapshot at the end of the year, but what's happened during the year. Are there new or strange new transaction flows flowing through the business? Are there unusual trends? Is the business performance declining steadily over the last 5 years? If you're just looking this year to last year, it's very difficult to see and those kinds of insights. When you look across a wider range and start looking at it in more detail by month, you can get a lot more value out of that, and your risk assessment is much, much more robust. And then going further, some firms use things like subledger data when you're auditing receivables, maybe inventory or cash, to do those more specific audit procedures, using analytics to perform it on 100% of the data instead of just a small sample, which we typically use. And going a bit further is looking outside of the audit to use benchmarking. So maybe comparing the client you're auditing with other clients that you audit in similar industries, or looking at marketing benchmarks. There are various different benchmarking organizations out there that provide information on how different markets are performing, what's going on in the market, what is risky, what do we need to consider. And that's good because it stops you focusing kind of myopically on the client that you're working on, and allows you just to kind of zoom out and put everything into context with the market and kind of the economy as a whole. And I know that often within audit firms, the people with the real market knowledge are the partners and the more senior members of staff, but they're not doing a lot of the audit work. The risk assessment is probably being done by somebody on the actual audit team who doesn't necessarily have that market insight. So being able to use data helps those people to kind of get that partner view of the market, stepping outside of the audit.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. I remember there was a course I used to teach called benchmarking for adding value like 10 years ago. And I felt like I was telling people, come on, you got to do this. And no one was really doing it. I mean, there was a few that were doing it, but it was so leading edge at the time. By making it more mainstream, and actually I think that's concept of making this mainstream comes back to one of your other points, which is that it's no longer this whole analytics benchmarking is not just the specialty team off to the side. It's like every auditor really needs to be able to do that to do a good job on the audit. So I'm glad to hear you guys are helping to make this a reality.
And that's another really important kind of underlying of having an analytics team doing the analytics and then just kind of sending a report to the auditor. It's very difficult to then modify your audit approach, because the auditor doesn't understand. They're just taking a report and put it on file. If there's something which is significantly out of line with a benchmark, or they're moving the opposite way to the market, you need to address that somehow in your audit. The audit approach needs to change. It needs to be your kind of actual auditors doing that, not the data analysts. And kind of moving even further than benchmarking, beyond kind of the structured data that we typically use, the stuff that might come in an Excel spreadsheet or a data file, is all of your unstructured data, things like your contracts and reports and things, using tools and technologies like natural language processing to read those, understand them, and get a more complete picture of the client and the audit outside of just the numbers, which is where we typically focus without having to read through stacks of contracts.
Just to add to what Steph was saying, and some food for thought when we think about all of this data. Today, most firms have access. They have access to lots of data, right? So as Steph was mentioning, things like contracts, but the Word documents we collect, the spreadsheets. We also create a lot of data as we're actually performing our work. And we're certainly storing all of this data. However, it tends to be in all of these separate places, right? The documents, the spreadsheets, the PDFs. And it's definitely not co-located, right? We can have it in document storage systems, our audit solutions, at some cloud storage place, right? It's kind of all over the place. And this makes it really hard to harness that data. And it really becomes what is referred to as dark data, right? It means we can't learn from it. We can't create further insights from it. And if we could do those things, that's how firms would create even more value for their clients and probably identify a lot more efficiencies in their workflows. So the approach that Steph is talking about is really like, how do we co-locate this data? How do we start to bring in that unstructured data as part of it and put it into these consumable formats that actually allow us to visualize the data? We learn so much if we can just put visualizations on top of data. We've certainly seen that on the analytics front, right? If you run an analytic, but then you put it in a graph, it just becomes so much more obvious to everybody where the problems are. You're like, oh, that's a really weird spike in the data, but you may not see it if you just went through the spreadsheet or if you just looked at like summarizations of transactions. And then if we can take that same co-located data that's in a consumable format and then expose it to some other tools, like Steph was mentioning, natural language processing, but that's also where some of these more advanced tools like machine learning and stuff can come in. We can start to create these new insights, which actually could create different service offerings that firms that could build out on. And Donny, to your point about benchmarking, like co-locating, that's how we get enough data all in one place to actually create really good benchmarks. And obviously cloud solutions are the thing that's really sort of enabling this.
Those are really great points as well. I think especially with the leasing standard implementation and RevRec, all of this coming in, those are all contracts that historically people have had to go through manually into paper by paper and highlight and paper and highlight and paper. So yeah, from what I've seen in the progression and the tools that help now extract all of that information and then identify using natural language processing and artificial intelligence, machine learning to really say, hey, here are the key ones that you might want to take a look at. And now the auditor or the audit staff doesn't have to do that manual work, which I think will also help in the long run with this whole staff retention issue, because none of us want to sit there going through all of these things. None of us would enjoy that. So to have a tool that can do that, and if I heard you right, so all of that information I now can gather as part of my CCH tools, and you guys will provide me some analytics or insights on that as well.
Well, that's the key thing. All of this kind of different types of data can be a little bit overwhelming, and that really is the challenge for us as a solution provider. And it's something we're continuously working on, is developing tools that take all of this technology, all of this data, and put it into a format that enables regular auditors to actually use it on their audits without having to be experts. And we have history in terms of like tools like Teammate Analytics being able to take regular data analytics and put it in the hands of auditors, and we are actively working on building all the new technologies into our products for the future.
Cool. And I know that you guys are actually one of the sponsors of our courses as well. We have our Audit Experience Lab where people can come in and actually touch this. So I know we've been talking a lot conceptually and people are going, I can't picture this. So if people are actually interested in that, I'd encourage them. We'll make sure that we put a link into the show notes about, come to one of our experience labs and actually get to play with the tools before you commit to some type of purchase. All of this that we've been talking about probably sounds very futuristic to people, but I think it's actually the big message from today's episode is this is now. This is not like we're talking about this is what's going to happen. The tools are here. You guys have tools that help support this. So that's, I think, a really important message for people. This is not the future anymore. This is the now. And so you really need to be thinking about this, especially, I know it's a little late for this year's audits, but as you're thinking about next year, this summer really should be come take a look at the tools, see how they've changed, figure out how you incorporate this into your audit methodologies. With that said, let's go into the future. And I am curious. It's funny because everyone always asks me, and I always ask the experts and you guys, where do you guys think things are going in the auditing? What does the future look like, and what is Wolters Kluwer thinking about as you innovate into the future?
Well, at the risk of sounding like a stuck record, for me, audits becoming data-driven is an inevitability. You look at the AICPA; they are kind of nudging auditors towards a more data-driven approach, and they're doing it primarily with a view to improving audit quality and making sure that the profession remains relevant. I mean, that's their job as the AICPA, but they're unlikely to ever dictate that you use a particular audit methodology or you use specific tools. The real driver for this is going to be coming from firms as they kind of come to terms with the fact that if they don't do an audit in a kind of data-driven way, they're going to be put at a disadvantage. You know, they're going to struggle to audit modern businesses with the volumes of transactions that go through those businesses. Addressing risk appropriately is going to mean huge sample sizes, and it's just going to be less and less viable for them to be profitable and be able to charge an affordable audit fee to their clients, and other firms will overtake them. I mean, there are some really great innovations in the audit space, but what we often see with auditors is they struggle with like a hodgepodge of different tools. You know, I've got one tool for my audit management, another tool for my methodology, another tool for my analytics, and they struggle to get the benefits out of all of them because they don't really work together. So we're really investing in trying to pull those innovations together and make them more accessible. One example is having one common data model where all of your data comes into, so we can then leverage that in all different ways, and you can leverage that in other tools as well. So then you can integrate all of that data into your risk assessment process. You can integrate it into your data analytics. You can use it to automate a lot of the decisions that you have to make during the audit, all those checklists you have to fill out. We've already got some solutions that support data-driven audit. Knowledgecoach, Teammate Analytics are really driving towards that, and really advancing those is certainly my and our focus for the near future. We're also trying to build awareness because, like I say, it's a lot of this thrust is going to have to come from auditors. So making auditors aware about data analytics, data-driven auditing. We run regular webinars. We have podcasts, videos. We've got a blog series. We've just released a white paper that digs further into data-driven audit and kind of provides some more guidance on how firms can move into kind of that direction. But I mean, Colleen, what do you see in your audit crystal ball?
Well, if only the audit crystal ball could be absolutely accurate, wouldn't that be great? I mean, if I step back for a minute, I think that staffing challenges, like Donny, you mentioned this, at the beginning of our conversation, they're going to continue to impact teams, right? So we're going to have strained capacity probably for a while. We keep talking about the Great Resignation, but it's not just that. When we look at students coming out of university college settings, there's just fewer of them that are coming into the accounting field. So this isn't a problem that's going to go away anytime soon. So, partners like Wolters Kluwer, we're continuing to invest in technologies that help streamline processes and make things easier for auditors to do their jobs, whether they're in the office, working remotely on site with clients, however we might find ourselves working. And in addition to that, we talked about, shifting some of the work perhaps downstream or maybe upstream, but making it simpler, right? So there's a little more flexibility in who can do the work because we're focused on that streamlining of the process. We know that audit solutions are going to have to deliver those integrated components as Steph just talked about. We know that we're going to have to integrate with other solutions that firms might be using because we really need to optimize that data entry part of the process. Like there's just too many times that we enter data more than once in our multitude of systems and applications that we use. So we have to optimize that so that we can create efficiencies in those data communications back and forth. And that also eliminates a lot of the errors that go on, right, when you do that data entry more than once. And so it really sort of ensuring that the CCH Access audit is really that hub for firms. And, when data comes in, whether it was through an API connection into our systems or our systems natively, that we've created that sense of fluid data communication. And then once we've enabled staff to work, the way they want to work and the way they need to work, and we've connected all their technology, then we need to think about how do we further streamline their tool sets. We can all, set our sights on simple solutions that continue to solve these complex problems, like harnessing those analytics to perform some of that preliminary analysis on our clients. Like that's part of this data-driven approach that we're very excited about. It's like, how can we pull the data in and have it automatically do some of this stuff for us versus assigning it out to staff and expecting them to go do those tasks? And, how can we ingest this data and start generating trends and the ratio analysis and spot patterns and sort of bubble that up and highlight it for the teams, because that will actually get them, it's kind of like that fast start or kickstart into an audit. Instead of starting from what seems like a blank piece of paper in an audit program, it's like, if data was served up to them and said, hey, this looks different from last year, this is different from their peers. When we took a look at benchmarking data, and when we had the conversation about where we expected, certain lines of their business to go, we're actually seeing something different in the data. Like that would just have a completely different start to an audit than I think we have today. And then the other thing that, I think the crystal ball tells us we have to do a better job of, even though we've started down this path, is providing those diagnostics and coaching in the solutions to guide staff through the work they need to perform and create a much more optimized and intelligent audit approach that yields that profitable audit that every firm is looking for, and a satisfied client, right? Like we provide the audit opinion on financial statements, but wouldn't our clients be so much happier if you also came back to them with some of those visualizations to say, and here's how you compare to your peers in your industry, or, here's this analysis we've done over several years because you've been a client of ours for a while, and here's where, we see your business going, and here may be some areas you need to start paying attention to. They're fine now, but they may not be going forward. Like that would just be such a different experience.
And I think that's huge. I'm so glad you kind of brought that back up, because it's that client experience and the fact that I'm not just doing something just purely for compliance, because that's often, I think, the thought. If auditors can switch it around and actually deliver value, and this whole concept of delivering value from the audit, again, we've also been talking about for years or decades even, right? But it sounds like the tools are finally coming together. And from what you guys have described, when I'm working with the CCH suite, now it's become a lot easier for me. Everything's just going to be automated. There's all the integrations. I always talk about system selection, and I talk about the best of breed versus the suite approach. And this is definitely one of the benefits of the suite approach. Everything is integrated and works together. Thank you very much for both of you for kind of sharing some of the future, although it sounds like some of the future is already happening from what you guys are bringing into the market this year. Colleen, you brought up the whole concept of the resignation as well. I was working with an HR person, and she said, no, firms need to think about this as the great opportunity, because you have people resigning, but if your firm can actually show that we are one of the better places to work, part of the way they do that is to have more innovative solutions that make the work easier, less drudgery, and oh, this is really helpful. And now I can help the client, and I get that satisfaction of, I feel like I've actually done something to help a client move forward. That's going to attract and retain the staff that you have, so that you don't have to go spend money to go find some more staff, perhaps. So combine that with the efficiencies that you guys have described for us. I think sounds like there's some great opportunity if people check out your solutions. Well, we're actually, I just saw it's fun. We're just about at time. And time is, of course, our most precious commodity right now. So Colleen and Stefan, I thank you really very much for sharing your time with us and giving us insight into the innovations that Wolters Kluwer is bringing to help auditors really help this staffing issue that we just really discussed. So thank you again very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
We'd love to encourage everyone listening to come and visit us at the Center for Accounting Transformation website at www.improvetheworld.net. The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a framework for utilizing business innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply these innovations, and the opportunity to engage your talent and the community around you to further pursuit of innovative accounting practices and drive responsible and mindful business performance. So thank you again to Stefan and Colleen, and I hope that all of you out there will come and check us out again at www.improvetheworld.net. Thank you again, everyone, and I'll look forward to talking to you again on the next Innovation Insights.